Hi guys, I'm back with my fifth video here on my YouTube channel, and today I want to break down one of the worst investments I have ever made and show you the 5 steps or elements that made it one of the worst investments I have ever made. So to get down to it, I want to bring you into the small cap universe of the Swedish Stock Exchange and what was previously called Aktietorget. And we are back in 2015. I just recently joined the stock market. My first 2 weeks on the stock market, I was only investing in large C20, the largest Danish index at the time, stocks like Novo Nordisk, Genmap, Vesta, so on and so forth. And it didn't really fit my temper. So quite quickly I started getting into some of these Facebook groups, Facebook forums, that are also present today in Scandinavia, and I quite quickly fell in love with this small cap universe. And back then, even though I like to do some due diligence and analysis on stocks, in my early days of my small cap trading career, so to say, what I did a lot was to simply fell in love with stocks based on these posts on these forums. That is extremely dangerous to do, and I probably figured out too late. However, every mistake is a learning opportunity, and I think it has been extremely fruitful for my learning curve and my journey on the stock market. However, to get into the specific investment I want to talk a bit about today, it is called Interfox Resources, or were called Interfox Resources. And Interfox Resources was a very small oil company. They had an oil license in Tomsk in Russia. Some initial drillings had showed that the permeability of the oil was quite good, and the deposit or the license was containing quite some oil of the finest quality. And I think I bought at approximately 5 Swedish kroner at the time. I don't completely remember the market cap at 5. I think it was approximately 200 or 250 million Swedish kroner, so not a hell of a lot. But again, I was presented to the case via some of these posts in these Facebook groups. And back then, I think in the first element or thing I did wrong was that I bought a position in Interfox Resources, and I bought a quite significant position relative to my capital back then. So I think Interfox probably was 30-35% of my portfolio at the initial buy. And I didn't do any due diligence, not apart from just what was scratching on the surface in terms of what was the case about, management, who were they, but not sort of doing any deep dives on the management, and neither sort of really deep diving into the case. Also a thing, and I'm going to do a video on this later on, it's often very difficult to invest in companies where you don't know the fundamentals of either the industry or the company itself. Oil is quite difficult if you don't know the technicalities behind it, especially when you're in explorers like Interfox Resources were at the time. So first thing, didn't do any due diligence on the case before buying and taking a 30% position of my entire portfolio in the company. That was the first step I did wrong. So we're back in the fall of 2015, and things sort of progressed quite nicely. I think within the first 6 months, the case surged to approximately 10 Swedish krona or so a 100% return. However, I became a part of a specific group of investors on Facebook again, only following this, and then these groups that are covering specific stocks are very good at becoming sort of cheerleading groups of the company, because it's often only investors in the company that are rarely negative, or at least rarely has an agenda of actually hurting the share price. So I became part of this group, and basically what I read was that this case is a no-brainer. It's a risk-free 500% return from these levels. oil of this quality and licenses of this quality have never been sold below 3 billion Swedish kroner, sort of comparing to other cases that have no relation to the case here. So sort of falling into all the traps that are on social media when it comes to the stock market, and I kept adding to my position. So what was already a quite significant position in terms of capital allocation in relative percentages of my portfolio, I just kept adding, and I did the second wrong thing here. I followed people's advice blindly, and especially blindly by social media, which is extremely dangerous to do. So going into 2016, going into I think it's end of 16, or maybe we even in 17. I don't really remember the timeline actually. The case kept going up, and things were really progressing nicely. I think we got to 15 Swedish kronor or so without any specific news actually to the case. And all of a sudden, the company published, after some rumors had been on the stock exchange, the company published a news release that they had entered into a memorandum of understanding with a Chinese player, quite a significant. I think it was a publicly backed, public in terms of was the government of China that had backed the company, that was interested in buying in the company. And I think we must be in the end of 2016, or at least during 2016, because what I remember is that in 2017, what happens is that the oil price goes down to $25 per barrel, but that is sort of later. So basically the stock kept going up, and I had added throughout the upward trajectory of the stock, but I didn't sell any shares, even though it hit my initial price target of 12 Swedish krona, which was 150% up from my initial entry. It hit 15 krona, which was my next price target. I kept raising the bar because I kept reading people's stories about this is an absolute no-brainer. We will get 20-25 shares per stock, but I didn't sell any shares. So there were no risk management, which is sort of the third thing I did wrong during this investment. I didn't really take the top off, and then a classical thing I do today, and also what you will know if you have read some of my tweets on Twitter, I'm quite good at sort of decreasing my position, and maybe you're doing it too soon. I don't really care, because it's all about risk management and sort of reallocating capital into new cases, and there will always be another case. So I didn't sell any shares, kept adding to my position. What was now, I think it was approximately 50% of my portfolio back in the days. And all of a sudden, things went wrong for some reason. The Chinese company ended up not being able to raise the capital required to actually buy the oil license. There were some financial issues with the company. All of a sudden, the economic growth in China was uncertain. The oil price went down to 25 Swedish krona per share, and the worst that could happen for a young fellow on the stock market happened. So apparently, Aktietorget had been a pain in the ass for Interfox Resources in terms of actually laying out information regarding what seemed to be, at least from their perspective, a shady deal with the Chinese company, and sort of them being in a pain in the ass for Interfox Resources made the Chinese buyer also back down a little bit. So during an interview or a meeting in the December, I think it was between Christmas and New Year's, the chairman of the board of Interfox Resources apparently threatened the leader of Aktietorget back then, and that led to a trading halt of the stock, and it led to what later became a unlisting of the shares of the company. So basically, what happened shortly before that, I think I was in Millionærklubben back then, because I just I just joined Copenhagen Business School in the summer of 16, I think. So we are on track regarding the timeline actually. So I joined CBS during the summer of 16, and I was part of a investment competition where Saxo Bank, Danish investment bank, was hosting on CBS Copenhagen Business School. And I was part of Millionaire Group for the first time in the fall of 2016. And what I remember as clearly as some of the biggest memories in my mind is that in the radio during the program, I was at my Nordnet account, my trading platform. I entered my entire position into a sales order, but I didn't push the button. So I had all of my shares entered into a order on my trading platform to sell all the shares, and this is at 20 Swedish kroner. So the stock just kept going up on all of these rumors about the oil license being sold to these Chinese guys. So greed had gone upon me, and even though it had reached my third price target, so we had 12 kroner, 15 kroner, and 20 Swedish kroner. Now we are up 350% from my initial investment. I didn't sell, and that is the fourth thing I did wrong, was that I was just greedy, and I didn't want to sell before the deal was confirmed, even though it had reached my price target. So the stock was under a trading hold for, I think it was 6 months or so. It was insane. There were no communication, and Aksha Talk had made some investigations on the company, and all of a sudden they were to be unlisted. The company changed name to Nickel Mountain Resources, and just this January the company changed name to Blue Lake Mineral, which has merged with a couple of companies that are in the mining space, gold, also some copper, I think, nickel as well. They still hold the oil license that has been for sale for 5 years now, and I think 3 years since the failure with the Chinese company. They haven't managed to sell it yet. I'm down 90% on my investment, which is actually, I think, right now it's probably at the bottom, but I think when it was unlisted and then sort of listed to an unregulated exchange, I think we were down at the same amount. But they have diluted their shareholders so many times. They have not kept their promises, and of course it's difficult when you end up in a situation where there is a trading halt, which was the case here. But I didn't have a stop loss. I was greedy. I didn't cut my loss. I think what is the most insane story, or sort of addition to this story, is that so in 2018 I went to London for a 3-month internship, and the company was relisted as Nickel Mountain Resources on one of the small exchanges in Sweden once again, and it came so they did some additional testing on the oil license, and the drilling came back with amazing permeability of the oil, super high quality, and the stock rose by, I think we are up 250% on the day. And once again, I entered in my my full order into a sales order, my full position into a sales order, but I didn't sell. Once again, because I had made it into some sort of principle that I didn't want to sell before the actual oil license was sold to another company, and we would be getting this sort of full amount in a dividend. So I think it is quite the learning experience actually, and I think it has been extremely fruitful, because many of the things I have listed in this video of the things I didn't do back then, I would never do today. And I think it is my biggest recommendation to avoid all of these things. So didn't do any due diligence initially before entering the company. A good example is I just posted an analysis yesterday, 6-page analysis of Candente Copper, which is my newest addition to my mining portfolio, a copper play. 6 pages. I hope all of you have read it, or at least the ones that have entered the stock have read that analysis and made their own due diligence. I always do my due diligence before entering a stock these days. Second of all, I follow people blindly on social media, which is probably one of the rules in the top of the Bible of investing. Never do that. Always do your own due diligence before entering, even though people are praising stocks to the maximum. No risk management. So another top rule of thumb of myself today is that I always risk manage. Positions should never become too big. Even though I have a huge position in Cabral Gold these days, filling approximately 30% of my portfolio, I always sort of are cutting these positions every now and again to sort of keep my core position intact, but also avoid things to become too sensitive for volatility in my portfolio. Greed is just poor a poor thing to do, and probably one of the biggest villain out there. A huge emotion and one of the central emotions of trading and investing. Such a difficult thing to manage, but also if you have a strategy when you're entering, if you have your price targets and you just follow those price targets, it shouldn't really be an issue to avoid becoming greedy. No stop loss. Didn't have a physical one. I don't have that today either, but I would always have a mental stop loss. And if the stock went from 5 Swedish kroner to 22 Swedish kroner, I would probably have a stop loss of 10-15% from the top to just, of course, let things run, but also again risk manage in case that you want to keep your profits safe to some extent. And if the stock at some point decreases significantly in value, you want to sort of save those profits to some extent. And then the last one, and of course, Interfox Resources, Nickel Mountain Resources, and now Blue Lake Mineral has become some sort of learning experience, and sort of the picture you keep on your drawer or the picture you keep on your refrigerator to sort of be the worst example of what you shouldn't do. So that's also why I still have it in my portfolio, but you should cut your losses, because otherwise it simply becomes a matter of hope and a matter of whether or not you hope that that investment will become worth the same amount that you have paid for it back in the days. And I know people that have been in stocks for 5-10 years and just sit there with a 90-95% loss and just wait for it to get back to where it was when they entered it, and it will simply never happen. And then the worst thing they probably can do, unless they really believe in the case, the worst thing they can do is just add to their position and reduce their entry price, because then you just put good money into a black hole, which is not the way to go about investing. So this was a breakdown of one of the worst investments I've ever made, and some of the 5-6 of the biggest problems that I, or at least the biggest mistakes I made when I invested in Interfox Resources back in 2015. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and keep in touch, and I'll be back with some new learning videos soon. Bye guys.